I'm unmuting and hitting record. Okay.
Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors, February 22nd, 2021 to order. Get roll, please.
Supervisor Lewis.
Present.
Supervisor Day. Here. Supervisor Ayers.
Here.
Supervisor McDaniel.
Here.
Chairman Lyons.
Here. At this time, we'll have an invocation by Mr. Lewis, followed by the pledge.
We pray in peace that our prayers may be received and that we may be granted the knowledge and understanding to do those things we ought to do and have the grace and courage to faithfully accomplish them for the benefit and welfare of the citizens of our county. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While the room is open to the public, due to the size of the meeting room and social distancing requirements, no more than 10 attendees other than the county staff will be allowed in the room at one time. Per the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Executive Order 63, all persons over the age of 5 that do not have a precluding medical condition are asked to wear a face covering. We will hold citizen comments near the beginning of the meeting. There is one public hearing at 6 p.m. We will do our best to take citizen comments remotely. There are two options for citizens to offer comment. To join by telephone, you may dial one of the numbers listed on the county website. Webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can also refer to the county website for the information necessary. If you wish to make comments, please use the raise your hand feature on the screen. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. At this time, we'll welcome citizens' comments. If you're in the room, please make sure you've signed up on the comment sheet. Once you are called, please address your comments to the board from the podium, beginning by clearly stating your name and magisterial district. This is an opportunity for citizens to provide comments. Please do not expect the board to respond to questions or engage in a dialogue. If you have questions, please ensure that you have entered your contact information on a citizen comment sign-up sheet, and the staff will do their best to respond to your questions as soon as possible. Citizens are respectfully requested to keep comments brief and not to exceed 3 minutes. There's a timer on the podium for your convenience, and to address only those issues which are not part of the public hearing. The same rules apply to those attending virtually. Once your name is called, please state your full name, magisterial district, and contact information for the record.
Currently, we have one individual signed up on the citizen comment sheet,
Okay.
and that's John Repair from Natural Bridge District.
Good evening. My name's John Repair. I live at 731 Tinkerville Road in the Natural Bridge District. I'd like to address with the board the concerns that I have about the safety of Tinkerville Road and Route 64. If you're familiar with that road, it's the shortcut from Route 11 to Glasgow and over to 501 to Lynchburg. The speed limit is not posted, so what that means is it's 55 miles an hour. There is nowhere on that road where you can travel safely at 55 miles an hour. The reason being is the road is very narrow. I've measured it several places. It averages just under 20 feet of width. Your double line stripes take up 1.5 feet of that, which leaves very little room for cars. There's treacherous curves all the way through it. And if you're traveling over 25, 30 miles an hour, you not only put yourself in danger, but other folks. The other thing is, if two vehicles come together with the narrowness is bad enough, but most of the road has very little shoulder. Where there is a little bit, usually it's a drainage ditch that's anywhere from 1 foot to 2 foot deep. We also have streams along that road that are right up against the road, where people, if they go in, they're going to go into a stream. If they go off the road, fencing is a major issue on that road, right at the edge of the road itself. Not really, but within the parameters of the road to where it's allowed. However, that's not very far when you look at the width of the road and so forth. You have about a 3 foot distance. So people go through fencing. If they don't hit fences, streams, ditches, there's rock ledges, there's banks throughout that road. In the curves are very sharp. There are a lot of blind curves. When you get up to near one end of it, if you're familiar with North Drywell Hollow Road, formerly, and most people know it as Racetrack Road, there's a very 90-degree turn right there. Very dangerous if you're coming from the Glasgow area and then you want to get on that road. It's treacherous. A lot of the past problems that have happened there, I'll speak for myself first. I've had 120 foot of fence taken out with one individual. I had another individual go off the bank in a convertible, hit the nose of the car, go end over end. And fortunately, the two people in the vehicle walked away safely. Had another person that went over a bank and into a corner post and totaled their car. My mother's car was totaled as she tried to pull out the driveway. The other problem was we had a pickup truck come around that curve up near North Drywell Hollow Road. Way too fast, overcorrected, got into the 2 foot deep ditch. When it tried to correct again to get out, it flipped over and ended up on its roof in the straightaway of the road, one of the few straightaways. The other problem that we have is tractor trailer trucks. There's a sign there that says no tractor trailers, but it is not enforced. It's not adhered to. And part of the reason it's not adhered to is because the sign is too far in from the corner of the road with Route 11. It's about 15 to 20 feet in. And if you've ever driven a truck and a trailer, if you're making a left-hand turn, you're looking ahead, you're looking behind you to see where the back of your trailer is. Then as you start to turn, you've committed, and then it's too late. You've seen the sign. So that sign needs to come out to the corner of the road with Route 11, or the end of Tinkerville Road and Route 11. There also needs to be on that sign that it says no vehicles over 40 feet, but there also needs to be a sign with tractor trailer with a red zero or circle around it with a line slash. And underneath that, it should say double fines. The reason being is more and more the people driving trucks don't speak English. And they're listening to their GPS in whatever language they speak. And it gets pretty awesome when you get going up through those curves. And I've been run into the rock ledges up there as you come down through by a tractor trailer, and we were both stuck. And we move a lot of farm equipment through that road, and I'm not the only one. There's several farmers that participate using that road as a way to get where they want to go. We've also had one person go through a fence down over the bank and stop approximately 15 feet before Mr. McElroy's house. And we've had Mr. Stanley at the bottom of that hill. His fence has been rebuilt, at least the total fence, if you figure the sections fixed over the last several years, that total fence has been replaced 3 times at least. And I think this is something that really needs to be taken care of. I'd like to propose that Tinkerville Road be posted at 35 miles an hour. I'd also like to propose that where the yellow signs are that mean they have the miles per hour. And what that means is that's suggested. I'd like those signs changed to white signs so that is the speed limit. The ones that are posted, they start at Mr. McDaniel's house and they start down in the bottom there between McElroy's and where Mr. Woodson used to live. But we need to get control of it. The other thing that needs to be done is there needs to be a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit on Forge Road from Sailings Mountain Road to Tinkerville Road. As people come through those woods, there's a couple curves in there, and then you've got a 90-degree curve on the corner of my property. I've had 3 people go through that fence. People come around that curve, and they're way over the lines. Mr. Gray, opposite of my property, has put up approximately 50 feet of forsythia that he has let grow wild so that people can't just run through that intersection. They've got to stop. But it's amazing the people that still do it. But it's a place that is, that whole section of roadway from Sailings Mountain all the way around to Route 11 is probably one of the most dangerous sections of road in the county. It really is. And when you travel with farm equipment, even in a car, it is incredibly difficult and dangerous, and people have no regard or respect for what you're trying to do, especially moving equipment. And we've got to stop these tractor trailers. That's got to be done. I mean, and with changes, I would encourage law enforcement to enforce the law there. Let people know that they've got to go the speed limit, because otherwise it's just going to run rampant like it does now. The average speed through that section is probably 55. On some of the straight sections, 55 to 65 miles an hour. If you've ever traveled it, you've had people do that to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Repair.
Okay, I have one
You
other
have-
comment I'd like to make too, unrelated. Take 2 seconds. I would like to suggest to the board that you set your public time for comments to 6:30 in the evening on your agenda. Have it set at 6:30 every meeting. I've tried to get in here for 3 months. 5:30 is difficult for me, I can tell you. And I've got to believe other people that have to work, it's awful difficult to get in here at 5:30 and take advantage of your public comment section. I appreciate the opportunity, but I just wish it would be more advantageous to the public so that they could come in here and get their points across. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Is that it for anyone else that didn't sign up?
No, we did have one introduction though.
We're ready for that? Okay, you want to do the introduction, Mr. Suter?
Sure. At the last meeting, you had asked me to extend an invitation to the new Glasgow town manager. It's Mr. George Hayfield. He's with us here this morning. Met George last week. We had lunch and got to know each other a little bit. He just started his second week as Glasgow's new town manager. And I'm going to ad-lib this a little bit, George, but he started his career in Virginia in local government and spent some time as manager in, I believe, South Fork, Colorado, and where I actually was this fall, and most recently as town manager in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So just wanted, and he asked if he could attend in person. And I said, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, come on up and welcome, and we're glad you're here. And
I just wanted to say that I'm happy to be here in Glasgow, and I look forward to working with the county as well, and being a citizen of the county as well as Glasgow. It's a beautiful place to move to, and I'm very happy to be back here.
well, we welcome you, and we're here to assist in any way we can. So don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you for coming in person, Mr. Hayfield.
Thank you.
One question, though, where did you start in Virginia? Where else were you here?
Clark County,
Clark, okay.
just up the road. I lived in Berryville and lived in Winchester for a while. I also I was county administrator of Scott County, far
Okay.
southwest.
Yeah.
That was my first job in administration. I went directly from being a zoning administrator to being a county administrator, that was quite the event.
Is there zoning in Scott County?
No, it didn't actually. In fact, that was one you always warned not to say anything about zoning in Scott. Now I imagine Scott County probably still doesn't have zoning.
My wife's from Russell County, so I know the area.
Well, thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayfield.
All right, if everyone had a chance to review the July 21st joint school board minutes and the February 3rd budget meeting minutes and the February 8th regular board meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Ayers,
yes,
and the chair votes yes. The school appropriation resolution.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. If you go to your board docs package, you'll see there's an appropriation resolution that involves the school fund, so that's Fund 50, and also the school cafeteria fund, that's Fund 56. The combined appropriation resolution is for $53,094. I'm available for any questions. If there's no questions, the recommendation is to approve the appropriation resolution as presented.
Any questions for Mr. Bolster?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Ayers,
yes,
Mr. Day,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. We have an update on health insurance.
Yes, I believe we have. Jim Gordon is here. Stefan, if you could promote Mr. Gordon to a panelist, and I'll give a quick update. Heidi Hoke is also online. Our HR manager and Steve Bolster's here to answer any questions too. So in January, the board received a presentation from One Digital, and that included a summary of the options available with the status quo with local choice and an estimated renewal figure based on claims data from Anthem and Cigna that are comparable to benefit plans and contribution scale currently in place. Projected costs for the status quo option were modeled to be at a 9% increase over current costs. That was our initial estimate of what we thought it was going to come in as. And the FY 2020 renewal rate was received last Wednesday, and it included an 8% increase and a one-time adjustment for, I believe, for COVID of 4%. So the final total was 3.7%. But in actuality, it was an 8% increase, but we're getting a bonus there. Comparison for the data for the renewal and self-funded options is going to be presented in a minute by Mr. Gordon. Staff's also been working on some contribution models that may minimize the impact to the county while achieving targeted goal of providing more affordable benefits to staff. Additionally, staff met remotely with representatives from Pulaski County. They are similar to Rockbridge. We had to search around and see who we could find that had a similar experience and make sure we knew what we were getting into if we went self-funded. Pulaski had previously used Bright financial management software and continues to do so in some applications. They did transition to a self-funded program in 2014 while they were still in the Bright system, which makes them comparable to us. And they also serve as a fiscal agent for multiple agencies, as we do. Discussions resulted in these findings. In the first 3 years of the self-funded plan, Pulaski was able to maintain a $1 million surplus each year. They've not experienced a benefit rate increase in the last 5 years, so they've run well. They're much bigger than us. Their total enrollment plan is 500 members, of which 350 are county staff. We've only got a total of, I believe, about 204 typically here. Billing and reconciliation for self-funded plan differs from our current procedure. And this is one thing that we did find talking to Pulaski. They did have to hire some help to do this. We've been looking at that and would like to require additional staff to implement and maintain the program. So if it's the board's desire to move towards a self-funded plan, it's strongly recommended to add a new full-time position with fiscal services and to ensure increase or efficient transition and assist with the increase in current payroll and benefit responsibilities. And I also point out too that we are very slim in that department. There's a couple of points of potential single point of failure there. If somebody goes down, we've talked for several years about trying to address that, and this would help with that as well. And if we did something like that, we'd probably have to make some modifications upstairs and perhaps even close in the area where the I guess the original reception area was as you come up the steps to the right. That was one option to be able to house somebody there. And like I say, is Jim Gordon is present to go over the findings, and I'll be glad to take any questions you might have at this point, or if you want to go straight to Jim, we can hear what he has to say.
Any questions for Spencer before we move on? We can go straight to the consultant.
It's all you, Jim. You need to unmute.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time this evening. Just really going to probably reiterate some of the points that Spencer's already made, but we had projected in our last meeting, based on the claim data we were looking at, we had projected a 9% renewal. The actual local choice renewal, when it was released at 8%, so we were pretty on target there. As Spencer mentioned, they have given you a one-time adjustment. I kind of refer to it as a COVID adjustment for lower utilization in the past year, which brought the overall increase down to 3.7, which is represented here. So if you can see my screen, TLC current for dental, medical, and vision has the annual cost year currently for the county, and this has been adjusted for enrollment at $1,849,000. The 3.7% renewal increase would bring that up as you went into the plan year, July 1, 2021 through 2022 to $1,917,000. And that would be obviously a fixed cost. The work we've been doing the last several months has been looking at the self-funded market and the options of a viable transition to that platform. As represented here, these numbers are consistent with what we've looked at before. Both Anthem had expected, and a max liability at this point is not looking competitive, or at least it would cost the county a significant amount of money to make that transition. Cigna, on the other hand, at expected cost, is coming in slightly below current at about 2%. Their max liability, which would be the most that the county could experience in a given year, which I rarely see anyone get to that. That's 125% of the expected number is 2.1 million. We had some discussions earlier, and I would recommend that we budget somewhere between these two numbers if you look to make a transition to Cigna as a potential partner to do this. We had budgeted a 9% increase. Cigna's coming in at a -2%. So that would put us about 7% over current as a potential budget, which would be about 12.5% above expected, which would be a pretty good number. We are working with the leadership team right now in the process of updating and getting final and best numbers from both Cigna and Anthem. We've let Anthem know that they at this time are not the most competitive on the self-funded platform, but have asked them to revisit their numbers. So we will be updating those for the next board meeting, as well as providing contribution scenarios as to where we would recommend the county set the premiums that they would bill and charge the employees from a percentage perspective. All of this from a benefit perspective is either apples to apples or slightly better. I won't go through them line item by line item, but there is a tab on this illustration that you can look at. And if you compare the current benefits as you work down this sheet, you'd be able to see that they compare with Cigna and Anthem really side by side. As we work through it, you'll actually end up seeing that Cigna's got a couple of enhancements in some areas. So just know that if you look at this, there's a second tab that's got the benefits, and all the financial assumptions are including medical, dental, and vision cost, and assuming either apples to apples or slightly enhanced benefits. I've got one other view just to show you that's a little simpler to look at. And again, this shows you they're all at current renewal, then Anthem and Cigna, all assuming $100,000 the individual stop loss, meaning no claim over, any claim that exceeds $100,000 would be covered by the reinsurance by either carrier that you would choose. We have a maximum liability of 125% of the expected number. And you can kind of work yourself across the sheet, but you can see that the local choice renewal coming in at 3.7% or 1,917,000 right now at expected. Anthem's proposals 15.7% above current. Cigna's a negative 2.4 below current. When you look at these numbers compared to current cost and the renewal. As I mentioned, I think the max liability is what we want to focus on. And at this point, Cigna can, the max liability for Cigna is about 14% above current. Again, that's the most the county could pay in any given year if things, blew up and went sideways. In my 30 years in the industry, I've only seen it happen twice. And again, we are in the process of working on some budget illustrations that would have premiums and employee contribution splits that will land us somewhere between the expected liability and the max liability. And I also am waiting on updated numbers from both Cigna and Anthem to see if they are able to sharpen their pencil. That's kind of an overview at this point of where we are. Again, we'll have firmer budget numbers on the self-funded proposals as well as premium illustrations. But at this point, given the number of years we've had the conversation and been in talks, Cigna certainly is still giving the county a path to transition to a self-funded platform, give you more control over cost and benefit design, give the county the ability to capture the surplus in the good years and build up a surplus that can be carried forward and most importantly used to maintain benefits and keep costs down for the employees as opposed to looking at an ongoing cost year over year. What questions can I answer for anybody at this time?
I think last time we talked, there would be a fee to leave Anthem or local choice.
Yeah, that's a good question. And as I shared with the leadership group, that is not something you'll have to make this decision without knowing exactly what that would be. That is not information that local choice would release before probably mid to late September. That's just their mode of operation. Right now, again, the initial renewal came in at 8%, which is below trend of 10 or 11. So it still indicates to me that the group is running well. We don't see a significant increase in the claim data at this point. The one thing we do not get is prescription data. So we're not exactly sure how that's running, but the medical data continues to run well. And again, obviously the argument that we would make is when you look historically at the last 3, 4, 5+ years, the county's been extremely profitable and looks to continue to be that way for local choice. And certainly we would argue on behalf of the county that they shouldn't be charging you to leave, but we will not know what that would look like until September.
Any other questions?
Jim, when we met the other day, sorry about that. When we met the other week, did we discuss, do we have to hire a third party to do the ACA reporting or compile those reports for us?
We included that in our original projections. That is something today that is included in local choice that you would have to have someone externally do. And I think we had that projected at about $5,800 annually.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And that's very commonplace. And we have third-party vendors we work with every day that do that. So carving that out it should not be a difficult thing to do.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Jim.
Yes,
Enjoy
sir.
the
Thank you.
presentation and look forward to the next meeting.
Yes, sir. Everybody have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. We have the reimbursement resolution for Central Elementary and Fairfield Elementary HVAC projects.
We're right at 6 o'clock.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll come back to that after our public hearing that is scheduled to start at 6, and we're right on time. So,
Dr. Lyons, before we jump into that, one other question. Are we having number 7, the Horse Center update?
no.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have announced that to you all. We had some, John Nicholson was unable to be here, thought he was going to be able to come in. This is just an informational item, and I've asked if he can come back on March 8th, and he said he could do that. So the information is included in your package. You can go over it. We'll just recycle that if it's okay.
Sure, that's good that he could come speak with us. Good. All right. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna have the public hearing on ordinance to amend the Rockbridge County Code, Chapter 11, Article 3, Sections 11 through 32 and 1133 to relocate the polling places for the Effinger and Collierstown precincts.
Mr. Chairman, this public hearing is for adoption of an ordinance to approve the proposed relocations, excuse me, of the Collierstown precinct and the Carrs Creek Magisterial District would be moved to the school board offices. There's a letter on the agenda confirming approval by the Dr. Thompson, superintendent. The other proposed change is to relocate the polling place for the Effinger precinct and the Buffalo Magisterial District from the fire department to Palmer Community Center. And there's also a letter from Ms. Rocket, secretary, on behalf of the Palmer Board of Directors to approve use by the electoral board. The proposed ordinance is included in your agenda, and if acceptable to the board following public hearing and discussion, the action would be to adopt the proposed ordinance if approved. The members of the electoral board, I believe, are here, as well as our county registrar. I don't know if they would like to speak to this, but I thought I'd mention them because I forgot to last time.
We saw them, but we see them there.
Mr. Stone, you want to talk to us?
I'm Harry Stone. I live in the Buffalo district. We've been on kind of a search mission. We got a letter in November after the presidential election that the Effinger Firehouse, which had hosted 2 of our precincts, would not be available for us to use anymore for elections. They didn't really give a reason. I think they may be struggling a little bit, and we're one more thing. Sometimes one more thing is, I guess, one too many. So we were very fortunate to find, it's a little unusual, although we do it a couple places, to have 2 precincts or 2 polling places at one host. Legally, we can have that happen, as obviously that one host cannot be in both Effinger and Collierstown. The firehouse happens to be in the Collierstown precinct. But as long as the polling place is within 1 mile of the border, then we also do this up to Natural Bridge Fire Department, where we have Holly Spring and Plank Road, even though Plank Road is actually a different one. Well, at any rate, we were looking for two places to hold an election, and we've got one coming up on the 8th of June, unless the legislature finalizes moving it to the 15th, which they're not totally done yet, I don't think. We were very fortunate. The Palmer Community Center, number one, has been renovated in the past few years, and number two is right in the heart of the Effinger precinct. And they were very gracious and seemed to really want us, and we appreciate that. We looked at a couple of things, but we wound up talking to Dr. Philip Thompson, the school superintendent, to see if he could carve out a place for us in the school board office. And what they've done out there is take the Effinger Library and convert it into a conference room. And it's a great place to come in and vote. And he was unbelievably accommodating. I'm sure you guys know him, and you know he was a nice fellow. When I was the assistant principal of the old Rockbridge High School, and he was a student there and was linebacker on the football team. He's still a nice guy, and was much more important than being a nice guy, was incredibly helpful and agreed to host us. So we're here to recommend that those two places be the place that people go to vote. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have, or I have backup, way back.
Any questions for Mr. Stone?
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Okay, at this time, we'll open the public hearing for comments.
Mr. Chair, no one has signed up.
Is there anyone online, Mr. Suter, that wishes to speak?
There's no one with their hands raised.
Okay. Then at this time, we will close the public hearing. Comments from the board?
I just like to thank the community members, those organizations for stepping up to host. And I think a school is a great place to have an election, by the way. So I'm glad that's worked out.
Agreed.
Do we have to have two separate motions, one for each location, or can it all be in one?
The ordinance is prepared to do it all with one action.
Okay. So we just need one.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes as presented.
I second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone, and your backup. Now we'll go back to the consideration of the reimbursement resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you go to my agenda item, you can see that over the past few years, the Board of Supervisors and the school board have coordinated on a project and a financing for replacing the HVAC units over at Central and Fairfield Elementary Schools. Those sets of HVAC units are approximately 20 years old. And at this point, they're nearing the end of their life cycle. The school division is seeing increasing costs for maintenance and repair on those units. You may recall at the joint board meeting on November 19th, trained account manager Scott Wise provided a presentation on the projects at the joint session. For Central Elementary School, work includes replacing the rooftop HVAC units and the ductwork, and so that would involve new insulation and a metal jacket. The project is scheduled for work in the summer of 2021. For Fairfield, it's a little bit different in that there is some need to get deeper into the school itself. So it involved the HVAC, replacing the rooftop HVAC units, but also doing some work on the interior components of the system itself. And that is estimated to begin in March 2021. As you know, both projects have been in the CIP for FY 22 to 26, which was provisionally adopted at the first meeting of this calendar year. At the last meeting, staff communicated that our working group, so that involves county and school staff. It also includes our bond counsel and our financial advisor. We got on a conference call and discussed some of the challenges with potentially doing a dual track, that it would involve a leaseback financing through the Economic Development Authority. And it was determined that that would probably not be the most efficient and effective process to do. And so we have moved forward on submitting an application to the Virginia Public School Authority. That was due today. It was submitted earlier at 11:30, and VPSA has reached out to us already to coordinate a due diligence conference call in the next week or two. But as I mentioned, with Fairfield starting potentially in March, there's a possibility that we would need to pay for the invoices for that work in March and potentially even in April. And with the closing not scheduled until May of 2021, there would be a need for a local support prior to the funding becoming available. So with that, to ensure the county receives any funding that's linked to paying for March and April invoices, a reimbursement resolution is needed, needs to be adopted by the Board of Supervisors. The attached resolution was produced by our bond counsel. The working group has had an opportunity to review it. There were very minimal recommended changes. So with that, if the board is in agreement, we are asking them to adopt the reimbursement resolution associated with these two projects. And then I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Bolster?
Mr. Bosher, I know it's last minute, but as things change quickly in this environment, is there a no return point of, and maybe that's already happened, of going down the VPSA path for funding source? Or is that till that close? You know, if some other sources were identified in between, can you illuminate that a little bit?
Absolutely. I don't recall what the go, no go point is in the process, but there is a point, I believe it's in probably late March, early April, where a decision has to be made to move forward or not on the financing. So this is not, by submitting an application to the VPSA, this is not a, there's not an opportunity.
Not yet, yeah.
To not say.
Although we're investing time and energy.
Steve, may I also add, I think we had looked at a private bank route, and we at recommendation of bond counsel and others, that it didn't look like that was really worth the time and effort that was going to go into that. As far as if this would have been a $30 million deal, it might have made some sense. But by the time we paid bond counsel to do that, it would have been cost effective. And so the only other thing I would say is that I don't know if there'd be time to do another sort of financing if we hit the no-go date and still get the project done on schedule as expected. Those are fair statements.
And that no-go date, does that mean we can reduce the amount we're borrowing if other funds become available? I keep hearing rumors that federal money will become to get the schools back open. And those fundings can be used for air quality, which the HVAC systems would include. The state is considering some funding to get the schools reopened. If we're recipients of any of that funding, can we reduce the amount, or are we beyond that? Will we be beyond that point?
We're not beyond that point. So it would be in line with that kind of no-go time frame, where if some additional federal or state funding came down to support this project, we could certainly make a modification to the application. Really would probably just be a phone call to the BPSA just to let them know that we're requesting, less in financing.
Any other questions for Mr. Bolster? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Ms. Ayers.
Yes.
Mr. Day.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Bolster. Thank you. Consideration to schedule a public hearing on the county decals. We had a work session and talked about it. Do we want to go to the next step and have a public hearing? And if so, we need to direct council on the direction we want to go.
Initially, I would have to say that necessarily regardless of the direction we go in, I think public input is important, and scheduling this public hearing would firmly allow that. So I'm in favor of scheduling that to see what comments come from that.
Ms. Huffman, how specific do we have to be for a public hearing? Is it going to be just to discuss the decals, or does it have to be more specific than that?
It would be advertised based on what you have presented. If you were to select something in between what we have now and what is proposed, then that should be covered by the advertisement. However, if the decision were to impose a fee greater than what we have now, as has been discussed, that would be different. It would need to be advertised that way. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
But you could certainly hold the public hearing on elimination and not adopt that and keep what you have currently, without there being any issue with the advertisement.
Is everybody clear with that? And so, Mr. Day?
Mr. Chairman, and if I'm out of order, please feel free to correct me. But, we're talking about eliminating or changing a tax revenue for the county, and yet we haven't looked at the complete budget to see if we're going to be short, if we can afford to take such action. And we've discussed about, if you do, well, we're going to make up our shortfalls. And it's almost like our admissions tax. We've passed it, but yet we've got a lot of consideration to do. What are we going to do on nonprofit organizations, and are we going to change that? Right now, I do not see any reason to go to a public hearing on something because I'm not in favor of change.
Okay, you're not out of order at all.
Mr. Day, one response to that would be that as we said, if we do what's been suggested, there wouldn't be any lost revenue this year, so it wouldn't be relevant to this year. It would be relevant to next year's budget, I guess, which is what
exactly.
Yeah, which is what we're talking about there.
In my mind, to bring to public hearing without having a firm idea or even a sort of firm idea of what we're doing is folly. I think it, and for me, it's a no-go unless we know how we're going to make up this revenue. And so I just don't think we're ready. I think there were a couple of things, couple of nuggets, and I agree with Mr. Day that to make anything that affects our budget without even knowing where we are. I mean, we do know that expenses exceeds revenues. How bad that is this year, we're not quite sure. So we're pretty sure that for the next few years, though, things might not be good. So I am not at all in favor of going to a public hearing until we have more to present.
Well, I mean, there is a recommendation. So I don't know. We do have something to present. Permanent decals, $25. Maybe I'm missing something there too. Is that?
Ms. Huffman? You got a-
The ordinance as proposed is permanent undated decal for no charge.
Okay.
So I would need to make some changes in order to conform that to what was discussed earlier about a single one-time charge. If the amount is proposed to be different, I would need to know what that amount is in order to advertise it. But I think I can advertise it at 25 without any problem, even though it requires a little bit of modification to what you have in your agenda.
Okay.
Did we discuss a different fee, different charge?
That there was some discussion about a charge that might be greater than the current $25 annually.
Well, and so what's the timeline on that, Vicki? What's the timeline on this process if we were to move forward?
I think the timeline, one of the things that's driving this now is simply ordering decals. Mr. Votto, we kind of backed into the date. So if you got a June 30 deadline for display, she needed, I believe it was 5 to 6 weeks of lead time to be able to order decals, was how we got into this, backed into this date. So
That's what I'm trying to refresh.
yeah, and that would be, she'd have to be selling by May 15th to give 6 weeks of time for folks to be able to get their decal. So you back into that, we're in there middle of March. She has to make a decision to whether or not she's going to order decals, and if she does, whether it's going to be a permanent or the regular decal. So that's the time frame.
What's the difference between a permanent decal and the regular decal? If she ordered what she would normally order this year, could it not be used as a permanent decal moving forward?
Yeah, they have, the current ones have an expiration date on it, and they also have a number. And what the board had talked about is not putting a number, just having says permanent decal with no number is what the board had originally talked about.
Well, to Mr. McDaniel's point, could those decals be ordered with no date and no number and just the color, which would identify the annual change anyway, which we change the color every year? If it were not to proceed, then would that work?
It's not ideal, I don't think, but if it was a, obviously a standardized color and it didn't have a date, then it would therefore, I assume, be a permanent decal. It just wouldn't say permanent decal.
So then that couldn't be used as just an annual.
So
for one time.
I'm just looking at my calendar here. So our next meeting would be March the 8th. If we made a decision by March 22nd, so if we made a decision at the next meeting to have a public hearing on the 22nd, and would that be, or is that pushing it too close? Because I want to get some public input, because today I've had a couple of calls. Some people like the decals, some citizens, and some just hate the inconvenience of having to take it off and put it on. There's revenue associated with it. That we have a budget meeting Thursday night. So that'll give us a chance to look through where we are in the budget and what we're looking at. And gives us 2 weeks to do a little more homework. And then I'm sure this will come out and maybe more people will reach out to us and say, look, leave it alone, or yeah, I hate my decal. Now, right now that I'm getting at least from my constituents, a mixed view. So I think we ought to give them an opportunity to speak up at a public hearing on, yeah, I don't care about the $25. I just don't want to have to replace it every year. Hear what they have to say and how they feel about it.
But if we can't afford to do that, then, I mean, if we had a public meeting about dropping the property taxes, I think a lot of people would show up. But that doesn't mean that we can do it. And I
suggesting waiting till March to decide so that we all have a chance to see what the finance committee has done with the budget.
Okay.
But I think the public has a right to speak on this matter, since the only reason it was brought up is because we had some people say, hey, can you get rid of the decals? And they've been doing that for a few years, but now there are people starting to say, leave it alone. I want the decals. So I think we ought to hear from the public. Are we ready for a public hearing at the next meeting? No, because we could, but we'd have to limit it. Or do we need an extra 2 weeks is my question.
My only, I'd like to ask Mr. Votto, because that's where we backed into that number. If March 22nd would give you enough time, if you knew on the night of March 22nd, would you have enough time to order decals?
If we're moving the on,
They can't hear you.
I believe it would be enough time if we are moving the vehicle date to June 30. It would be enough time.
Thank you.
And that's been done.
Yes.
And I don't mean to, I'm sorry, my simple mind sometimes can't comprehend things, but if the decal is a certain color, and I realize they typically have an end date, expiration date, and a number on them. But for 1 year, would it really matter? If they didn't, and even if the board said, you know what, we're going to keep everything the way it is. Next year, you got to order a new decal, even though the one you bought this year didn't have an expiration date on it. You still got to buy a new one. What's the difference? I mean, why is that?
I think the one thing is the number that's linked to a vehicle.
But that's going to change the prior year when they buy a new one as well. I mean, to me, I think we've got a lot of questions, that we want to address and make sure we get it right the first time. I don't want to hold our treasurer up by ordering decals. I'm just wondering, for 1 year, regardless of what the board decides to do, does it really matter if that decal has an expiration date and a number on it? Even if we continue to do as we have been doing the following year, does it really matter?
Well, I think the only real impact of not having the expiration date on it would be potentially enforcement. Just if they put it on and then in the future never put another one on, there's nothing to indicate that it expires at any time.
Okay, and if it has an expiration date on it and the board decides to do something different, making it a permanent decal, could we say in some ordinance portion of it, say that ignore the expiration date on your current decal?
You could provide in the ordinance that any decal with with that on it, with that date on it, would be effective on a permanent basis. But then you would not necessarily have that one-time purchase of a permanent decal for when you make the changes.
I understand.
So,
I think the one pertinent piece of information here is that Mr. Votto just said, that if you wouldn't make a decision by the 22nd, that she would know. And she could order decals appropriately, whether they have a date or a number or say time.
And I guess it's safe to say if we can't make a decision by the 22nd, then things will proceed as they normally have until we can get ourselves together and see if a change can be made down the road. So is everyone okay with waiting till the next meeting to spell out specifically what the public hearing would be? Anybody opposed to that?
Are we going to have another work session before that meeting to discuss them?
We can. We have a meeting, a budget session this Thursday night. So that will provide us some information. We can actually tackle it probably during our regular meeting, the first meeting of March. But if the board feels like they want to get together and have a work session, we could schedule one probably at 5 o'clock before our next meeting. You just need to let me know.
And I would just like to say thank you to Mr. Votto for being willing to, amend your schedule around us. I appreciate that.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We have an appointment. Rockbridge Regional Jail Commission, a Glasgow representative. Do we have?
We do. He's with us tonight.
Okay.
And Mayor Shane Watts, if you recall at our last meeting, Glasgow was meeting the same night. And the way the regional agreement reads, or I guess the bylaws or articles, are that it rotates from year to year from Glasgow to Goshen. And the way it's set up is the towns recommend an appointment to the Board of Supervisors. So that happened on Monday night, on I believe the 8th. And so they have recommended that Mr. Hayfield be member of the jail force.
Congratulations.
So you would just need to.
Do we need to
make a motion?
Make a motion? Do we have one?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All right. Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Day? Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Congratulations. Welcome aboard. Be careful. Just keep piling it on you. All right. Board comments. Just a reminder that the scheduled budget meeting number 2 is this Thursday, the 25th at 5:30 in this room. Please take time to review your budget books. And if you see something that jumps out at you, reach out to either the Finance Committee. That's probably the best thing, and they will share your concerns. Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple things.
Okay.
As far as a RARO executive director, I think we had been on hold for that some time, and I expect Ms. Ayers is more informed on this than I am, as she's our representative. But if there's not, have we started a search for one, or could you update us?
Yes, I'll be happy to update you. We are currently working on the job description for that position. So the idea would be that if it looks as if we're coming out of COVID, in which we are, we've started, RARO has started its scheduling. It's starting to look a little more like like it used to. That if we feel that we're going to start to come back to normal, that we'll be able to hire a director sometime soon. That job hasn't been posted, and so it would still be several months. Are you asking based on the finance?
No,
Based on finances, or?
well, that's always part of it because
Yeah, right.
RO budget is part of ours, but
Yeah, yes.
no, my next comment may shed more light on, I believe we're ready to come out and we need to come out. So I was, thinking
Yes.
ahead for that role to be filled for our kids. And then another thought, is Mr. Henny still on the board there? Is he not?
Yes, sir, he is.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, with his long experience and not a sitting board member, he might be a good person to represent Rockbridge, on a search committee or whatever apparatus was devised to find a director.
Well, the director is hired by the board. And so Mr. Henty, because he's part of the board, will absolutely sit on, how can I say, he will be part of that process. But the process is the board's process, and Mr. Henny is very good at that sort of thing. So I'm sure he will be a big part of the process.
Well, that's what I was suggesting, that be I wouldn't necessarily envision the whole board would do everything. I was expecting some, maybe a committee or a subset.
Well, right. The board will come up with its process, and I'll make that suggestion for you.
Okay. Another thing is Mr. Huffman, I know I ask every month and I can't seem to keep it in my mind, but when is our emergency plan set to expire again? Emergency meeting, or that, I know that's not exactly the right term.
April 5th.
April 5th.
And so I've communicated with the chairman about it being placed on the agenda for the March meeting cycle for consideration to readopt and extend that, should it be needed.
Okay.
And along those lines, I'm sure everyone received a letter from Mr. Hart today, Cars Creek constituent, and I happen to agree with him. We've been in this a long time, and I think the governor owes it to the citizens of Virginia to kind of explain what the end game is. He's got all these rules in place, but when is it going to stop? Or what has to happen before his executive orders cease? Everything is trending in the right direction. How far do we have to go? Does it have to get? I think he needs to share with us. And I would like to suggest, I sent a letter several months ago asking that question. I'm still waiting for a reply. I don't want to blame the post office, but I just don't. You even check a box saying you would like a reply, but we haven't gotten any. Maybe if we as a board send a letter saying, we've tried to do our part, we're following your executive orders. What's your plan? Where did we have to get? Do we have to get? First, it was he gets on, positive tests. Well, tests positives are going down. Of course, they're not testing as much. Vaccinations are coming. People are getting. What has to happen before we can get at least open some things back up so that our local businesses can start to recover, so that everyone can do their job, so that people can feel comfortable coming to meetings. That's my 2 cents. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I'm absolutely in support of that, which is where I was going. And furthermore, if the letter might include, if the governor isn't able to decide that, maybe the legislature could. And that's, another question that's circling is how long do these powers exist, executive powers? So that's just a thought for what we might include in the letter, but I agree with you, sir.
Any other input?
I think it's a great idea. I support it.
Is there anyone who doesn't want it to happen? Please speak up so we can, I don't want to put words in people's mouths.
Well, I think you're asking for the governor to give us clarification for the next step, correct? I mean, that's what we're asking for.
Yeah, I just want to know
Yeah.
what he's basing his decisions on now.
I
And what
think
we have to
everybody,
do.
I think everybody could be down with that, so.
I mean, if you're competitive, you know, in any kind of game, you want to know what the rules are so you can
Mhm.
win. You know,
Mhm.
it wants to it needs to tell us what we have to do so we can get some normalcy back in our lives. And I don't think
Mhm.
much asked. My only question is that something you can do for us, Mr. Shooter?
Certainly, I can draft something and share it for the government.
Okay. And I would, if you could, yes, and if you could include Mr. Campbell and Mr. Deeds.
And maybe you can email it to them in case Dan's concerned about the postal service. But maybe we do it
No,
both
I
ways.
think the Postal Service does a great job. I'm just saying, I've been waiting for this, for a reply for several months now, and
But both methods might be
Right.
well served.
I think you can email it and then we'll send a hard copy.
Will this include information not only about our meetings being able to open up and some sort of normalcy, but I'm really concerned about our local businesses
That's
and
right.
their
You
ability
know,
to
our
reopen.
restaurants, when can they start letting people in and so people can get back to work? I mean, people want to get out and do things. They want to be safe, and I think they have been safe. They've been doing the right thing for a long time. Things are getting better. We've got to see. It's got to share the light at the end of the tunnel. All right. Any other board comments?
Mr. Chairman, I was pleasantly surprised to hear the citizen comments about Tinkerville Road. I've discussed that several times with the board, and you know, if it would be okay, I mean, I would like to potentially talk with VDOT again about that. That everything that the citizen commented on is 100% correct.
I agree with you.
The road is too narrow. The vehicles fly through there, especially farm vehicles that are on that road. They're put in dangerous situations, and the tractor trailers need to stop on that road. So anything that we can do to help those issues on that road, I would be in full support of.
Well, I agree with Mr. Repair's comments. I think VDOT is very responsive when we send things. I think, one, we need to know what are we allowed to do or what we have to do in order to get the speed limit changed on the road and get the proper signage that was recommended. I don't know what kind of board action that takes, but if we can get that information from VDOT, then we can get the ball rolling. If they say we need to do a resolution, then we know what we need to do to have it done, and we can get on the agenda.
I can work on that tomorrow. I do know it will require a speed study. That typically is always required a speed study, a traffic study.
I just have to say I'm very sympathetic to the needs there, but I struggle with restricting types of vehicles on state maintained roads, and I also struggle with defining reducing speed limits as there for the actual speed limit if it's the suggestion signs, which seem to already be there. I think that's good, but I'm certainly not saying I don't want to examine the processes that we have, but I just wanted to be upfront about my concerns. It's the same story. I'm in business, and when I need a truck to be able to get to me, I need the truck to be able to get to me.
Right.
So I just,
But
I sympathize, but I want to make sure that we don't solve one problem and create another.
no, I think safety it should be our number one concern. I think the reason the speed limit is 55 is because it's not posted. And if I remember correctly, back to driver's ed days, any road that's not posted, it's automatically 55. So, even though, I can go out Jacktown Road, it's not posted. You can't go 55 over Jacktown Mountain. But the problem is you're getting people who aren't familiar with roads, taking roads that vehicles that size probably shouldn't be taking. But I think it's worth looking at.
And that'll tell us where maybe some arrows, the yellow arrows, warning of curves, anything like that.
And certainly, Mr. Lewis, I don't want to impede any business operation such as the one you're talking about. The issue with the tractor trailers going across that road is they're coming off of interstate, more than likely going to Mohawk or to Big Island. They can very easily go Route 11 and come around. The GPS just takes them that way.
I understand.
And not that we're trying to stop, but I mean, there's another way that those tractor trailers can reach their destination.
In a better way.
A quicker way.
But so I'm all for it. We can help them understand that. All for it. Lexington City is going through the same problem with as defined on 64. So it's a conundrum, and I'll support the safety any way I can. But I just needed to say those words.
Okay. So it's something we can definitely work on. Any other comments? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, yes. Happy birthday, Mr. Bolster. Congratulations. I have a present here for you. Courtesy of the Sheriff's Department.
Happy 39th birthday, sir.
Enjoy.
Re-gifter.
Appreciate the creativity and the work.
That's it. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
moved.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you.